Hey guys, all right, so I'm gonna just talk a little bit today about the approach of what I do and how I'm working with you guys to give you a little bit more insight to the direction and the purpose that we're doing. A lot of you guys have been with me for a number of years, some of you, and the gratefulness I have around that is massive. Moving to Coffs Harbour was it was possibly, I'd rate in the top four most stressful things I've ever had to go through. Moving from Cape Town to Sydney was way easier than moving from Sydney to Coffs Harbour and trying to reset up business, etc. And so it's sort of acknowledging around those areas. It's part of what I look at when I'm working with you guys. And a number of you on the board systems, you'll know. I ask you how are you. I know a lot of you guys. I know your lives to some degree. I don't need to know everything, but I know stresses and I know joys, etc. And I'm grateful for that sharing. And part of that sort of information was what I wanted to raise with you guys today in how I have set up the structure that I use, which I call basically the Force 3 Plus, because I'm always, essentially, there's three things as a minimum I'm always thinking about and directing and trying to use as objectives and directions around each individual that I'm working with in here. So essentially this is something around like what I'd call the foundations of the Force 3 Plus, or the Force 3 Plus system. Maybe let me rephrase that, is what I look at is just foundations for health and longevity. I'm not saying all these things count. I'm just saying a lot of what I try to do in the aspect that I've taken for the Force 3 Plus system, which is much bigger than what I'm about to discuss here, is looking at the foundations of health and longevity. I have written up my cheat notes because it's Saturday morning and it's been a huge week. And I'm not going to remember to say things right or say all the things I need to say. So I'm just going to cheat a little bit away with this, guys. But the Force 3 Plus system, to me, I base it on the concept of nature in relation to chimpanzees, gorillas, and humans, and how much interaction and how close we're related. I know gorillas are not the same as chimps and humans, but I have... in the context of nature, the strength and the power that they have, plus the gentleness and the humanness, if you want to call it that, absolutely fascinates me. And I use them as a role model, if you want to call it that, around something that a lot of us humans could take on board. I look at chimps. Going back to the gorillas, a lot of that role model work, it happens with me is what I look about or call the strength and the power that they can dictate, especially in that physical, mental kind of plane. Not that there's a capacity to think, but we know there is a capacity to think with with the creatures of that ape-like nature. They obviously dictate or are able to observe love and express love as well with their young, and with their mates, etc. too. So I use them as one aspect to it. I go into chimpanzees for the functionality that they bring. They have got the flexibility and the mobility, the strength, the power, the speed. Look at how they move in the jungles. One thing I want to bring back to that is people always often think of them as vegetarian or vegetable eaters, whereas they're omnivorous. Chimps are omnivorous. And I think that's really important to reflect in context of their DNA being 2% different to ours. And anthropologists, archaeologists, etc., acknowledging that humans and chimps diverted from each other. I was actually just reading about this the other day. It might even be something like 4 million years ago. That diversion started 2 million years ago. Started to happen. And then there's us, the human side of things. And we can bring life, which I look at in the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual kind of thing. In saying that, we can bring sort of death and destruction as well. We have the power to go both ways and do it more than any other species on this planet. most of us, I think many of us at least, want to bring in much more of a positive human element to our lives and to those around us. So those are the sort of three organisms, if you want to call it, that I look at and how they function on this planet and how they function within each other, and how that what that dictates to me around the capacity of what I bring into here. From my side, I try to relate to all of you. I know what stresses in many capacities around emotional, mental. I've had a gun held at my chest. I've had a knife held at my throat from behind. I've walked in on a murder. I have had huge injuries. But then I've also been I've had massive successes. One of them being where the business is now, and how long it's taken a long time to get that to COFs, but it's been a really, really fantastic result up to now. Same in Sydney. Like, I could never have imagined my life in Sydney by comparison to what it was like in South Africa. And whilst I was on the top of my game in some ways in South Africa, I was deep down in the shithole too, with many other things. So I try to relate to you guys and how you're feeling, etc., and understand the level of fatigue that might be going on, or the days that you are on, and what we can do with that. And I choose exercises or programs for the day around that. Some of you might come in on programs and we subdue it from some days. These are a big part of it. The Force 3+ system in how I've sort of wanted to work it is allowing for fluidity and for flow, not being restricted to a direct path. I have a very sort of natural, my version of nature is very much around the fact that things do in nature what they need to do. And I think the bodies need to look at that as well. There's too many rules. Part of this was a conversation I was having with Kane. There's so many rules about stretch like this and stretch like this and hold this position, hold that position, and get this angle of your hip right, etc. And I acknowledge that is important. I'll acknowledge the science stuff. The last couple of videos I've had, very much this is the black and white. And believe me, I believe that science. But every now and again, there's anomalies and dynamics that change and are different, especially with flexibility and stability stuff. We've got to be different and allow for those changes. Coming to that, I look at the body as being something that's 75%, well, depending on who you read, let's just say guesstimate 75% water. Water is meant to be a flow kind of substance, and it's never restricted to a direct path in nature. Water will find a way to get past an obstruction or move around different things, because it is literally going from A to B and constantly does that. Flexibility is about flow. Mobility is about flow. Stability is about flow. Strength and functional force obviously are as well, but they don't happen without the rest of it happening below it. Paul Chek has this thing about the sequence of everything should be flexibility, stability, strength, and then power. We can bring a lot of the flexibility and mobility into context with each other, and bring the mobility and the stability into each other as well. There's an acknowledgement in spiritual circles about the lack of flexibility in life can be reflected in a lack of flexibility in the body, and vice versa. Obviously, flexibility in the body will slowly start to allow for flexibility in your life. And again, part of this is an underlying feature that I try to bring to you guys. I won't discuss it with some of you because it's just not something you're interested in, but with some of you are. And that's a big part of the foundation of the message I'm trying to bring. Whether it's a subliminal one or whether it's a conscious one, doesn't matter as long as it helps you. With this, again, a lot of it is about a Taoist. I basically boil it down to a Taoist approach. In the context of that water flowing around objects and finding its own path, and that's what we're trying to do in here. I'd encourage you at the end of the day to try to become part of a process, the process in here, rather than working against the processes. Part of that is the communication to me and allowing me the privilege of knowing a few things and working with you. And many of you express so many things to me that I'm grateful for, because it does allow me to help you. And that's ultimately the foundation of the 4-3 plus system. Maybe with time we can talk a little bit further and deeper about it. Thanks, guys. Cheers.